Day 264, Messianic Checkpoint, Matthew 22 through 24, Proverbs 19 verses 17 through 20. Let's begin. Matthew 22 through 24. And responding, Jesus again spoke to them in parables, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like a man who was king, who celebrated a wedding for his son. And he sent his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding. But they were not willing to come. Again, he sent other servants, saying, Tell the invited, Behold, I have prepared my meal. My bulls and fatlings have been killed, and all is ready. Come to the wedding. But they ignored this, and they went away, one to his country estate, and another to his business. Yet truly, the rest took hold of his servants, and, having treated them with contempt, killed them. But when the king heard this, he was angry. And sending out his armies, he destroyed those murderers, and he burned their city. Then he said to his servants, The wedding indeed has been prepared, but those who were invited were not worthy. Therefore, go out to the ways, and call whomever you will find to the wedding. And his servants, departing into the ways, gathered all those whom they found, bad and good, and the wedding was filled with guests. Then the king entered to see the guests. And he saw a man there who was not clothed in a wedding garment. And he said to him, Friend, how is it that you have entered here without having a wedding garment? But he was dumbstruck. Then the king said to the ministers, Bind his hands and feet, and cast him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. Then the Pharisees, going out, took counsel as to how they might entrap him in speech. And they sent their disciples to him, with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are truthful, and that you teach the way of God in truth, and that the influence of others is nothing to you. For you do not consider the reputation of men. Therefore, tell us, how does it seem to you? Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar, or not? But Jesus, knowing their wickedness, said, Why do you test me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin of the census tax. And they offered him a denarius. And Jesus said to them, Whose image is this, and whose inscription? They said to him, Caesar's. Then he said to them, Then render to Caesar what is of Caesar, and to God what is of God. And hearing this, they wondered. And having left him behind, they went away. In that day the Sadducees, who say there is to be no resurrection, approached him. And they questioned him, saying, Teacher, Moses said, If anyone will have died, having no son, his brother shall marry his wife, and he shall raise up offspring to his brother. Now there were 7 brothers with us. And the first, having taken a wife, died. And having no offspring, he left his wife to his brother. Similarly with the second, and the third, even to the 7th. And last of all, the woman also passed away. In the resurrection, then, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all had her. But Jesus responded to them by saying, You have gone astray by knowing neither the Scriptures, nor the power of God. For in the resurrection, they shall neither marry, nor be given in marriage. Instead, they shall be like the angels of God in heaven. But concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken by God, saying to you, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And when the crowds heard this, they wondered at his doctrine. But the Pharisees, hearing that he had caused the Sadducees to be silent, came together as one. And one of them, a doctor of the law, questioned him, to test him. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said to him, You shall love the Lord your God from all your heart, and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. But the second is similar to it, You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments the entire law depends, and also the prophets. Then, when the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus questioned them, saying, What do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he? They said to him, David's. He said to them, Then how can David, in the Spirit, call him Lord, saying, The Lord said to my Lord, Sit at my right hand, until I make your enemies your footstool? So then, if David calls him Lord, how can he be his son? And no one was able to respond to him a word. And neither did anyone dare, from that day forward, to question him. Then Jesus spoke to the crowds, and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees have sat down in the chair of Moses. Therefore, all things whatsoever that they shall say to you, observe and do. Yet truly, do not choose to act according to their works. For they say, but they do not do. For they bind up heavy and unbearable burdens, and they impose them on men's shoulders. But they are not willing to move them with even a finger of their own. Truly, they do all their works so that they may be seen by men. For they enlarge their phylacteries and glorify their hems. And they love the first places at feasts, and the first chairs in the synagogues, and greetings in the marketplace, and to be called master by men. But you must not be called master. For one is your master, and you are all brothers. And do not choose to call anyone on earth your father. For one is your Father, who is in heaven. Neither should you be called teachers. For one is your teacher, the Christ. Whoever is greater among you shall be your minister. But whoever has exalted himself shall be humbled. And whoever has humbled himself shall be exalted. So then, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! For you close the kingdom of heaven before men. For you yourselves do not enter, and those who are entering, you would not permit to enter. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! For you consume the houses of widows, praying long prayers. Because of this, you shall receive the greater judgment. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! For you travel around by sea and by land, in order to make one convert. And when he has been converted, you make him twice the son of hell that you are yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, Whoever will have sworn by the temple, it is nothing. But whoever will have sworn by the gold of the temple is obligated. You are foolish and blind. For which is greater, the gold, or the temple that sanctifies the gold? And you say, Whoever will have sworn by the altar, it is nothing. But whoever will have sworn by the gift that is on the altar is obligated. How blind you are! For which is greater, the gift, or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Therefore, whoever swears by the altar, swears by it, and by all that is on it. And whoever will have sworn by the temple, swears by it, and by him who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven, swears by the throne of God, and by him who sits upon it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! For you collect tithes on mint and dill and cumin, but you have abandoned the weightier things of the law, judgment, and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done, while not omitting the others. You blind guides, straining out a gnat, while swallowing a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! For you clean what is outside the cup and the dish, but on the inside you are full of avarice and impurity. You blind Pharisee! First clean the inside of the cup and the dish, and then what is outside becomes clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed sepulchres, which outwardly appear brilliant to men, yet truly, inside they are filled with the bones of the dead and with all filth. So also, you certainly appear to men outwardly to be just. But inwardly you are filled with hypocrisy and iniquity. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, who build the sepulchres of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the just. And then you say, If we had been there in the days of our fathers, we would not have joined with them in the blood of the prophets. And so you are witnesses against yourselves, that you are the sons of those who killed the prophets. Complete, then, the measure of your fathers. You serpents, you brood of vipers! How will you escape from the judgment of hell? For this reason, behold, I send to you prophets and wise men, and scribes. And some of these you will put to death and crucify, and some you will scourge in your synagogues and persecute from city to city. So that upon you may fall all the blood of the just, which has been shed upon the earth, from the blood of Abel the just, even to the blood of Zechariah the son of Berechiah, whom you killed between the temple and the altar. Amen, I say to you, all these things shall fall upon this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem! You kill the prophets and stone those who have been sent to you. How often I have wanted to gather your children together, in the way that a hen gathers her young under her wings. But you were not willing. Behold, your house shall be abandoned to you, having been deserted. For I say to you, you shall not see me again, until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And Jesus departed from the temple and went away. And his disciples approached him, so as to show him the buildings of the temple. But he said to them in response, Do you see all these things? Amen, I say to you, there shall not remain here stone upon stone, which is not torn down. Then, when he was seated at the Mount of Olives, the disciples drew near to him privately, saying, Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your advent, and of the consummation of the age? And answering, Jesus said to them, Pay attention, lest someone lead you astray. For many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ. And they will lead many astray. For you will hear of battles and rumors of battles. Take care not to be disturbed. For these things must be, but the end is not so soon. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be pestilences, and famines, and earthquakes in places. But all these things are just the beginning of the sorrows. Then they will hand you over to tribulation, and they will kill you. And you will be hated by all nations for the sake of my name. And then many will be led into sin, and will betray one another, and will have hatred for one another. And many false prophets will arise, and they will lead many astray. And because iniquity has abounded, the charity of many will grow cold. But whoever will have persevered until the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached throughout the entire world, as a testimony to all nations. And then the consummation will occur. Therefore, when you will have seen the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, may he who reads understand. Then those who are in Judea, let them flee to the mountains. And whoever is on the roof, let him not descend to take anything from his house. And whoever is in the field, let him not turn back to take his tunic. So then, woe to those who are pregnant or nursing in those days. But pray that your flight may not be in winter, or on the Sabbath. For then there will be a great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until the present, and such as will not be. And unless those days had been shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days shall be shortened. Then if anyone will have said to you, Behold, here is the Christ, or he is there, do not be willing to believe it. For there will arise false Christs and false prophets. And they will produce great signs and wonders, so much so as to lead into error even the elect, if this could be. Behold, I have warned you beforehand. Therefore, if they will have said to you, Behold, he is in the desert, do not choose to go out, or, Behold, he is in the inner rooms, do not be willing to believe it. For just as lightning goes out from the east, and appears even in the west, so shall it be also at the advent of the Son of Man. Wherever the body shall be, there also will the eagles be gathered together. And immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then the sign of the Son of Man shall appear in heaven. And then all tribes of the earth shall mourn. And they shall see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, with great power and majesty. And he shall send out his angels with a trumpet and a great voice. And they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from the heights of the heavens, even to their furthest limits. So, from the fig tree learn a parable. When its branch has now become tender, and the leaves have sprung forth, you know that summer is near. So also, when you will have seen all these things, know that it is near, even at the threshold. Amen, I say to you, that this lineage shall not pass away, until all these things have been done. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. But concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of the heavens, but only the Father. And just as in the days of Noah, so also will be the advent of the Son of Man. For it will be just as it was in the days before the flood, eating and drinking, marrying and being given in marriage, even until that day when Noah entered into the ark. And they did not realize it, until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the advent of the Son of Man be. Then 2 men will be in a field, one will be taken up, and one will be left behind. 2 women will be grinding at a millstone, one will be taken up, and one will be left behind. Therefore be vigilant. For you do not know at what hour your Lord will return. But know this, if only the father of the family knew at what hour the thief would arrive, he would certainly keep vigil and not permit his house to be broken into. For this reason, you also must be prepared, for you do not know at what hour the Son of Man will return. Consider this, who is a faithful and prudent servant, who has been appointed by his Lord over his family, to give them their portion in due time. Blessed is that servant, if, when his Lord has arrived, he shall find him doing so. Amen, I say to you, he shall appoint him over all of his goods. But if that evil servant has said in his heart, my Lord has been delayed in returning, and so he begins to strike his fellow servants, and he eats and drinks with the inebriated, then the Lord of that servant will arrive on a day that he does not expect, and at an hour that he does not know. And he shall separate him, and he shall place his portion with the hypocrites, where there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Proverbs 19 verses 17 through 20. Whoever is merciful to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his efforts. Teach your son, do not despair. But do not set your soul toward putting him to death. Whoever is impatient will sustain damage, and when it has been taken away, he will set up another. Listen to counsel and take up discipline, so that you may be wise in your latter days.